a lot of the time when people talk about what value game designers bring to a team, they talk about the hard skills, like the craft skills of game design. And that's really important, obviously. That's why you hire a game designer, or you want a game designer in your team. But I found there's a lot of other skills that game designers can bring. And a lot of the skills I'll talk about are not exclusive to game designers. So if you're not a game designer, hopefully there's something for you in here as well. But for juniors, I think, thinking about how to develop yourself as a game designer in a team setting, and for seniors who are wanting to stand out a little bit more, thinking about how to develop themselves maybe into a leadership position, like what extra things do I need to know besides being a great level designer or something. And if by any chance there are any hiring managers in the room, hi, I need a job. And also, if you're looking to hire a game designer, consider some of these other things when you're interviewing besides what their craft skills are and whether they feel like a team fit or whatever. So that's where this talk's coming from. And who is this guy anyway? To give you a bit of a lens on where I learned all this stuff, I've been a full-time game designer for about 12 years now. I was very lucky. And that's in a commercial setting, so mostly mobile games, and working in teams. So that's where all this is coming from. It's mostly about teamwork and how to work in that kind of environment. I've shipped a really diverse range of games, and that's because a lot of this was at Pickpock, and Pickpock makes a really diverse range of games. But I've also worked at a few other places and seen how things work in other environments. So that's where this comes from. Oh, and I make weird stuff in Pico 8 too. Ask me about that later. It just looks cool on a slide. Pico 8 GIFs always look cool. Anyway, so about skills. So these are the kind of typical skills people think about. And they think about, I want to be a game designer, or I want to get better at game design. It's usually this type of stuff. Or you look at a job ad, like, we're looking for a game designer. This is the kind of stuff that we want you to know. A lot of them have design on the end. That's kind of a giveaway. But there's also things like documentation or prototyping. But they're all, I would consider all of those hard skills, craft skills. It's what my friend Jimmy might call the labor of game design. You might also see some of these talked about in a job ad. We want people with communication skills, we want a team player, and for more senior game design roles, you might also see things about vision, developing vision, holding vision, communicating vision. These are pretty vague, so I want to go a bit deeper, a bit more detail into some of these things, and get more specific about how these come into play for game designers in some situations where as a game designer, it's particularly important that you have some of these skills. So I'm going to spend quite a bit of time talking about trust. If you were at Chris Winning's talk yesterday, which was very good, by the way, I recommend it, he talked quite a bit about trust as well. There's quite a lot of overlap there. If you didn't manage to see that, I highly recommend checking that out when it comes out. I assume a lot of these are posted to YouTube or something later. Why do we care about trust? It's kind of intuitive, right? Like teams that trust each other, they just perform better, they argue less, they pull in the same direction rather than pulling against each other as much of the time. Some friction is good in a creative setting, but for efficiency, we want to be pulling in the same direction as often as possible. And we can't always explain ourselves to each other adequately, or we don't always have time for it. So the more trust there is, the more easily we can move in the same direction without having to constantly negotiate everything. If you've ever been unlucky enough to see a team that doesn't have trust in their game designers, things can get pretty ugly, or at least very inefficient. There's a lot more arguments. There's power struggles when you don't have clear ownership about who is making decisions about what. And there's even maybe reluctance or people checking out because they don't feel included in the creative process. All that's very sad. So trust is very important, but I'm not going to spend too much time convincing you that trust is important. I think we all know it is. And why it's particularly important for game designers to actively, I think, gather the trust of their team, intentionally do that, is because designers have a lot of power, and your team knows that. They know that your bad design decisions can wreck the game. And they are afraid of that happening, and they should be afraid of that happening. So you, especially as a game designer, need to think about building trust with your team. So what does it really mean to have trust? I think it means getting the benefit of the doubt, like when somebody needs to just trust that what you're saying is going to work out, and you don't really have time to explain to them or convince them that it is. Maybe they don't understand fully, or they don't necessarily believe it off the bat, but if they trust you, they'll go, yeah, okay, I guess it'll probably be fine, because in the past it has been, I trust this guy. Again, pulling in the same direction instead of against each other, that's what trust looks like. And also, I've found creatively, you get environments where people feel more psychologically safe, they offer more of their ideas, they talk about things more openly. You really tap into the creative potential of your whole team when you have a more trusting environment. And the game designers are often at the center of that, because they're often the ones getting a lot of feedback or a lot of ideas come in their direction. So I think the first skill, I guess, to wrap this bit up would be understanding that you can intentionally build trust and thinking about actually doing that on purpose. Because I think this is often where we start, right? Oh, trust me, bro, I know what I'm doing. I'm the game designer. It says here on this bit of paper, like, I'm the game designer. So I know what I'm doing. And when you're a junior, I think it's just, you don't necessarily start here. You're probably more humble because you're like, oh, I don't actually know, but I guess I learned some stuff at uni or whatever. Please bear with me. But after you've shipped a game or two, it's very easy to get into this mindset of, well, I've done this, so just believe me. Like, here's the design, like, don't question it. And I know this because I've done this before. I've made this mistake before. I've been through this. And one of the big problems I found with doing things this way is you kind of get too focused on proving yourself, because if you think that's where the trust is going to come from, like, I've made a really good design, or this game's been successful and I was the designer on it, then you start thinking, well, I need to prove that that I'm a good designer through my work purely, and so you're making it a bit too much about yourself at that point. And as you get more senior, this gets worse, because you are going to assume more that you should just have trust by default without having to earn it. And unfortunately, that's never true. I think the number one reason that teammates might not trust me or my design is just fear. They're just afraid that I'm blinded by ego, that I can't see outside myself. And you have to prove that that's not the case. It's quite easy to miss opportunities to make the game better, to not hear what somebody is saying, to not recognize a flaw. It's easy to get defensive about your own work. And this is a passion-fueled industry. We all know that. Everyone wants to make an awesome game. So it actually makes a lot of sense that they're afraid that you might be designing from a place of ego and not be able to see outside of yourself. They also might be afraid that they're excluded from the creative process. And for the people that this will apply to most on your team, the ones who most want to be involved in design, this is going to make the difference between them having a great time at work and them kind of being a bit bummed out at work. So take this seriously. I think this applies no matter how junior or senior you are. If you're new onto a team, they don't know you, maybe your back catalogue of games you've shipped can kind of speak for itself, but until they see it in action in person, that you actually are interested in what everybody has to say, that you're not designing from ego, they won't really be sure. So how do we alleviate this fear? Well, we listen. It's a lot easier to say than it is to do, but you can start just by listening. Listen to your team. I find ideas and feedback are the good points to do this usually. You can't really afford to just listen to everything all the time. You can't make infinite time for everybody. Some teams have a lot of very passionate people with a ton of ideas that are always coming at you. But when it's time to ideate, let them in. And when it's time for feedback, encourage that feedback. And when that comes to you, take the time to listen to it. And don't just value their contribution. Like, you've got to make sure that they know that you value it. So that's sort of active listening, I suppose. You've got to make it clear that you are not just listening, you're thinking about it. An example might be, well, for me, when I was working on Into the Dead 2, there was a particularly passionate developer who was really into firearms. And it's a zombie game, so lots of guns, we're adding guns to the game. And he came up with an idea for a gun to add to the game. And the first thing I thought when he told me the idea was, that's terrible and it's never going to work. And I did not say that to him because I knew better. And I heard him out and I engaged in good faith. And I tried to understand where he was coming from. And that alone goes a long way. It's not, you've got to do more than that, but I listened to him and I kind of heard some things that I hadn't thought about. So it was already worth doing, but that already starts to alleviate the fear that you're blind to other ideas or things outside of yourself because you are listening. It sounds simple, but making the time for it in your schedule is not simple. It's hard. So when it really comes down to it, prioritizing it above other things is difficult. But what I'm trying to say is you should try. You should try and prioritize it when you can, and try and find those points in the flow where it makes sense. So yeah, one of the skills, I guess, is listening and making people feel heard, which are not the same thing. Yeah, even better than listening when things are offered to you is inviting it. Actually ask them. Say, you know, hey, I want to hear your ideas, or does anyone have ideas? Or here's a design, love to hear your feedback. Like, go out and get it, be curious. One of the ways I did that at 2UP Games, which worked pretty well, was I created a Slack channel and it was called Crazy Ideas. We were a fully remote company, so we didn't have a lot of like hallway chatter because we didn't have any hallways. So the Crazy Ideas channel was about just sharing ideas, but like those kind of ideas that just come to you in the middle of the workday and they're not really about what you're trying to do, and you know they're out of scope, and they're kind of, but they're interesting, and you kind of want to share it, you want to talk about it, and we just needed a place to do that. And the one rule of the Crazy Ideas channel was riffing only, no judgment. You're not allowed to critique anything that is in there ever, because that's not what it is for. It is for sharing and talking and kind of fostering creativity. And some things out of there did end up going into products, usually very scoped down and like cherry-picked kind of pieces, but it was a good creative sort of garden. And on top of that, people felt heard, people felt listened to, because I was the only game designer at 2UP, and I started that channel and I actively said, I want to hear this stuff. And I think that went a long way with my team. So I guess another skill we could put here is fostering creativity, fostering an environment of creativity outside of the design team. And that's maybe more of a thing for seniors who have more influence over that stuff, but I think everyone can help to be a part of an environment that fosters creativity outside of just the designers. Also, showing your working is good. If people don't understand why you make the decisions you make, they're not going to trust your decisions as much. So share your working, show your working. If you take the time to explain why you're not implementing somebody's suggestion, then they have at least a chance of going, oh, okay, I see, that's fine. Usually, people find it hard to put down their own ideas. So it's not easy, it's not a silver bullet, but it goes a long way. I like to talk in trade-offs rather than absolute kind of judgments. So instead of saying, like, this thing is good or bad, I like to sort of say, maybe players will love how this looks, but they might also get confused because it looks a bit too much like this other thing, and kind of share your design reasoning a little bit when you're talking about and evaluating the ideas that are coming to you from other people. So for that Into the Dead example about the weapon getting added, I tried to say, oh, I can see how this has a lot of like cosmetic value to players. Like it's interesting, and it references a real world weapon that some people are weirdly fanatical about. But also, I feel like it doesn't have a lot of mechanical value to players because we already have weapons in the game that are the same as this, but actually better. So it wouldn't be very easy to make this game like functionally valuable. So showing a little bit of that reasoning helps that conversation along. And when people see what's behind your decisions, it builds trust that your intentions are to just find the best ideas and the best outcomes, and not just to only go with your own ideas. Even better than just having some reasoning is having things like design pillars and player motivations, and all those kind of vision things, vision artifacts, they're sometimes called. And if you can relate all your decisions back to those, then it helps to show that there's actually a foundation behind what you're doing and the decisions that you're making. And if you have a shared understanding of those with your team, and they're already bought into these things, then when you draw kind of connections between what you're trying to say or what your design is, or why you don't like their idea, which is often the hard conversation, if you can draw connections between that and, say, your design pillars or player motivations, who your player is, then it makes those conversations a lot easier, and it builds trust that you're not designing from ego, you are just trying to do the best thing for the player, or you're just trying to hit the design pillars as accurately as you can. And a side benefit of showing you're working a lot, especially when it comes to vision stuff, is improving the quality of ideas and feedback that you get from your team, because you're sort of slowly educating them, and you're sharing your knowledge with them, so they are more likely to be able to give you better ideas and more accurate feedback over time, because they want to come up with good ideas. They want to contribute, right? So if you're sharing how you're doing things, if you show them what your filter is, then they are going to be able to create things and come up with things that are more likely to get through your filter and make it into the game. So I guess the skill here is, I guess in part communicating vision well and connecting vision to your design decisions and bringing that into every discussion, including discussions about other people's ideas, but also just having a foundation for your decisions. If you can't have these conversations easily because you can't explain what's underneath your design decisions, that's a really good red flag that you're not doing the work in the first place to understand what your game vision is about and where your design should be coming from. So yeah, being able to articulate all of this is obviously a skill as well. Even if it works in your head, being able to say it to someone, it's not always that easy. So sometimes writing it down helps. This is a bit of a weird one, spending trust. So like we talk about earning trust, but spending trust sounds a bit weird. And trust is kind of like one of those squishy human sort of things. And I have to admit that I am a bit of an analytical systems design kind of person. So sometimes it helps me to think of trust as a currency, which I know is like an icky game designer way to look at something as human as trust, but I mean, you need to earn trust, and sometimes you need to spend it, and it's slow to earn, and it's very quick to lose. So yeah, it's kind of like money, it's a currency. But I think the main reason that I like to think about spending trust as a concept at all is that life is not perfect, and sometimes we will lose trust, and sometimes we will be in a situation where we can't explain ourselves well, and we can't let people in, and we can't do all the things that we want to do because there's just no time, right? Like the deadline for your next Fest demo is in a week or whatever. Like this is just the reality of developing games. So you're going to have to spend trust at some point by not doing all those things that you would like to do with your team. And because you have ownership as a game designer over certain design decisions, you're just going to have to go with what you think is best and get it done. So the trick to this is, I guess, to accept that it's going to have to happen at some point and do it intentionally, knowing what the effect is going to be. And the effect is going to be that you are spending a little bit of trust, and it spends really fast, like re-rolls in the Electro shop. Like it accumulates very quickly, and you can very easily go bankrupt. And also try not to feel like a failure when this does happen. Everything is imperfect. I think my best tip for dealing with this is to, when you recognize that you are going to have to spend trust at some point by just going, sorry, we're going to have to do it this way, trust me, bro, is to, every time you have the opportunity to build trust by incorporating somebody else's idea, you should do it. You should actively look for opportunities to incorporate someone else's idea into the design. Every time you do that, you build a massive bridge to that person who it was their idea. And anybody else in the team who experiences that happen and sees that happen, it'll be hard for them to draw any conclusion except, oh, this person really wants to just make the best game. They don't care where the ideas come from. They just want good feedback. They just want to make the design as good as they can. So that's what I try and do, honestly, is if I'm weighing up two designs, like I've got my design and I'm like, oh yeah, this is pretty good. And I get some feedback. Oh, we could do it this different way. And honestly, there's nothing in it. I feel more comfortable with my one, but I can't really articulate why. It doesn't really matter if we do the other one. I can't see a massive problem happening with it. It's just a little bit different. That's usually a sign that go with the other one, go with the other person's idea. And yeah, every time you do that, you'll earn a lot of trust so that when you need to, you'll be able to spend it and it'll be smooth. I've been in situations where I've had to say, okay, sorry, but that's cool, thanks, but I don't have time to really entertain more ideas and stuff right now. We're just gonna have to move forward with this. And people have gone, cool, okay. And that's the response you want. I'm gonna stop talking about trust now and talk about a few other things. Hypotheses are a really fun one. Hypotheses are scientific. You can be scientific too. I find science is very useful when you care about objective truth, and it is not very useful when you just want to continue believing that you're right. Hypotheses are a useful framework for making something feel a bit more scientific. So hypotheses are a great way to frame things when you want to highlight that there is an assumption in the mix somewhere. A lot of feedback that you'll get, and even when you're presenting a design, you might present it in a way that kind of suggests that there are some assumptions you've made that are actually fact. For example, the loadout screen auto-equips your best gear to help players jump into the action quickly if they want. So there's a loadout screen, and it does a certain behavior, and that's to help players do a thing that you assume they want. But that statement doesn't, it assumes a lot of things, and it doesn't really highlight that there's assumptions in there. But you could also say, I have a hypothesis that players will sometimes want to get through the loadout screen really quickly to get into the action faster, and I have another hypothesis that auto-equipping the best gear will help them with that. And when you identify things in that way, the obvious next step when you have a hypothesis is, well, is that true? Oh, we should test it. And then that leads you into a good habit of thinking about how can we test these things and highlighting that they are in fact assumptions. And when there are assumptions that you can't test or are difficult to test, those are kind of red flags of, oh, we should figure out, we need to know this stuff because we might be wrong about this. One of the most useful things in a team setting about the hypothesis framework I've found is my friend and multiple times colleague James Brown, I think, taught this to me by using it against me. when you get feedback that you don't really like and it's stated as sort of something stated as fact, like have you ever heard something like, isn't fun, or players won't like this, or this upgrade system is too grindy. Those are all statements of fact, but they aren't facts because the person who's saying them is guessing. And the best response I've ever heard to that kind of feedback, which just instead of being adversarial, like when I get feedback like that as a designer, I try my best, but sometimes I just get defensive. I'm just like, what? No, you're wrong. I don't want to be that way with my team. And it doesn't help, right? You end up on opposite sides all of a sudden, and you're on the same team. I don't want it to be like that. So when you frame something as a hypothesis and you go, oh, interesting hypothesis, how could we test that? That shifts it from, oh, now you're on the same side. Now we're both on the same team and we both just really want to know the answer to this question. And you also pose a question back to them. Oh, how do you think we could find out if this is actually true? So that's a great tip about hypotheses and using slightly more scientific language around your game designs and around the feedback that you're getting from other people. So I guess the skills here could be broken down as learning to recognize assumptions and using the language of hypotheses, so it's a little bit scientific, modeling this thinking by stating your own hypotheses so that people, the culture of your team starts to hear this as a thing, and maybe some of them will start doing it as well, and gently reframing feedback as a hypothesis to highlight the assumptions. I want game designers on my team who can do this type of stuff. Best guess. We're all guessing. We don't know. This is a very imperfect, I was talking about science just before, but we don't really have good answers, do we? Especially not before something comes out. We don't really know if something is good. We just have our gut feels. So I like this phrase, best guess, and I've been using it more and more. And it's become one of my favorite phrases because it's good for setting expectation. When I do design work, especially for the first iteration of something, I have occasionally come across people who really want it to be one and done. They want to know, what are we doing? How does it work? Cool, we're making that. And it's a little bit resistant to iteration. They would just rather that you got it right first time. And that's understandable, honestly. As game designers, we make so much work for other people, and some people's pipelines are really long, and not knowing what your architecture is going to have to be ahead of time because the designers are still figuring out what the stuff is annoying, right? It's annoying. So, got to have some empathy there. But when you frame it as best guess and you say, well, this is always my best guess. Every piece of design work you get from me is my best guess. What that does is it sets up the expectation that it is a guess. I don't actually know, and we will have to find out by testing stuff probably. But it doesn't let me off the hook as a designer. I'm not just throwing shit against the wall, right? It's my best guess. It's the best I can do. It's kind of 80-20. It's not my best as in I spent, a month working on this tiny feature, but it's my best as in I'm using all my skills and experience to try and get as close to the bullseye as I can with this design. But we've got to recognize that it's not going to hit the bullseye first time. I also find, so that's useful for my team for setting up expectations with the people who are going to receive design work from me and work with me on designs. But I also find it's good for me as a bit of a perfectionist. It helps me fight that perfectionism in me on design deliverables, and it helps me be okay with not getting it right first time. I used to want to go into a dark room and just work on this design and just get this perfect and solve the puzzle, and then be like, here it is, my perfect design, ready to be implemented now. And that never works. You just spend a lot of time on something that you'll just need to iterate anyway, and you're more resistant to iterating it, and you're more resistant to feedback, and you're more likely to be defensive because you spent so long on this design. You're way too attached to it. So yeah, I find that's just not a great way of doing things. So I think the skills here would be, I guess, setting expectations about design iteration that is going to happen, and also working efficiently by applying that 80-20 rule to your design work and trying to fight perfectionism and accept you're not going to get it right first time. So I want to wrap up with, I guess, a philosophy of how I see my role at the moment that incorporates a lot of what I've talked about today, something that I've been just thinking about lately. I think it's a useful mindset to have within a team. And I just call it humble design. I don't know, somebody's probably already coined that, I don't care. But it sounds right, so I went with it. And I think this is a good mindset to have. It's it's like servant leadership, but if you're not necessarily a leader or you don't see yourself as one, it's about having a position within a team that is about serving the needs of other people, whether that's your teammates or maybe it's your players. So humble design is basically having humility and curiosity towards your team and your players. So the humility side is, I don't know everything. I don't know everything. Doesn't matter how long I do this, I don't know everything. It's a moving target. And that's what's so great about this industry, right? Like, you can't know everything. You can't solve it. And it's also not about me. I think this is the biggest issue for juniors who come in and are like super passionate and just really want to make games that are like their favorite games. And it's very hard to start separating yourself from the players that you're actually aiming at. And also, what about your team? Like, probably not everybody on your team thinks exactly the same way about what will make a great game. Everybody's very slightly different, and that's an asset, but I think as designers it's useful to be curious about what everybody else thinks because of that. So don't let your desire to make something you love blind you to what everybody else is thinking and what everybody else might love. Yeah, don't let your desire to make your mark alienate your team either. And humility by itself, not that useful actually. I think humility is mostly useful when it leads to curiosity. Curiosity is kind of what you do about your humility. Curiosity is about wanting to find out and seeking answers outside yourself and valuing your team's contribution to design, regardless of what their job title is. What does my team think? What ideas are out there? What feedback is out there? And also being curious, being ever curious about your players. Like, what are their needs? What are their motivations? What do they want? What isn't working for them? And being honest about that. Yeah, so I think when we come in with this humble mindset, we're more open to information outside ourselves, and we can more fully utilize the creative capacity on our teams because we are actually listening to them. It causes a lot less fights because we build a lot more trust. We all pull in the same direction, more of the time anyway. And we can make better games because we're thinking about players, we're thinking about their needs, we're putting ourselves aside. Yeah, so that's the kind of designer that I want to work with, it's the kind of designer that I want to hire, and yeah, it's the kind of designer that I want to be. Here's a pretty GIF and some resources. Yeah, so just quickly, Richard Carrillo's GDC talks, you should definitely look at those. A lot of stuff in here is inspired by what he talked about. Probably some of the best talks I've seen on being a game designer in a team and stuff that isn't the hard skills. Really good stuff. Nonviolent communication, it's a cool framework of communication, thinking about how do we talk in sort of objective observations and make fewer judgments and hear less criticism even when people are criticizing us. Have better conversations. And obviously, oh yeah, and my LinkedIn, because you definitely want to hire me. Thanks. I'm super early, so let's just have a chat. There's a microphone, so I guess put your hand up and then wait a second if you got something to ask. And it doesn't have to be about this, to be honest. Just ask me anything. Yeah, it's recorded.
Hi. Sorry, the microphone. So tips for showing you're working without feeling like you're bragging, if that makes sense, especially if you've got a lot of experience. How do you say, this is how I came to that without it just giving that vibe?
That's fascinating. I don't think I've ever actually encountered that, but it might be because I just didn't realize it. I didn't think about it that way, maybe. Yeah, I guess, I would probably try to only show what's kind of absolutely necessary, or maybe what people might be asking for. It depends on the conversation. If you're showing you're working for design that you're presenting, say you're designing a feature, you've got some documentation, you're presenting it to either your team or the part of your team who's going to be implementing it, probably seeing it for the first time, having a little bit of explanation in there about where some of these things come from can be good, but I suppose the ones that matter most are things that connect to your goals. So what goals does your project have? What goals do you have for your sprint maybe? Or things that you collectively are all trying to do usually is a good one. So you can sort of show how the reason that you're doing it this way is because we think our player loves to collect things. So like, I'm gonna make the items we're collecting quite simple so we can make 3,000 of them or something. And just that kind of stuff. It doesn't have to be, it's not your whole process. It's not like proving to them that you know how to work a spreadsheet real good or something. It's more like, we have shared goals and I understand those goals. And here's how my design work is going to meet those, so that everybody else goes, yeah, I have those same goals, so that design seems good. And if your logic of connecting those goals to your design work actually has some flaws in it, then they can work on pointing that out to you maybe. And you want to know that, like if there are, actually maybe we could meet this goal better if we did it this way. Like you actually want to hear that as a designer probably because you just want the best design. Yeah, I think it's the best I got, but thanks, interesting question.
Hi. Do you have any tips for like if you start to notice yourself getting sort of tunnel vision, like taking a step back and looking at it more as a whole for like planning out the design of?
So getting tunnel vision when working on design. It's another really good reason to involve your team, honestly. There's probably a lot of different ways to do it, but yeah, you sort of just need fresh eyes. I think admitting that you can't look at something fresh for very long and you can't look at it through the eyes of someone who doesn't understand it intimately anymore because you've just been staring at it too long, and just admitting that to yourself and also to your team and being like, hey team, help me, look at this. Having people around you who you can bounce things off. Yeah, I mean, I've always been lucky enough to have a team. I think when you don't, you kind of need to work harder to find those people to bounce off, but everybody doing solo development is doing that as well at some point, because you just kind of have to. And the people who do it very late usually end up doing NZGDC talks where they say, I wish I'd done that earlier and gotten the feedback, because we just can't see our work clearly after a while. I think that's just the reality of it. Yeah, so I would ask for some external feedback, or just a session to throw something around, which can be a little bit different than just feedback. Sometimes just kind of, I think they call it rubber ducky, just explaining what you're going through or what you're thinking to somebody else, and getting that outside of your head a little bit can help you hear it, and then you hear it in a different way. Yeah, those probably be my approaches to that.
Hey, I wanted to ask, like, if you're presenting something to a wider team, sometimes I'm like I'm presenting this, like I want to know what you guys think of this, like immediately, and that's why I'm presenting it. Because sometimes, we might present something, and your team will be like you can say they're like having gut reactions, but they're like holding it back. So, like, do you have maybe advice on like how you can frame like, please do tell me what you think, like actually?
Oh, wow. Yeah. So when you have a team who is reluctant to give you their honest feedback, maybe they don't want to hurt your feelings, or maybe you're like the most senior person on the team or something, and everyone sort of defers to you, you don't really want them to. I guess there's a lot of reasons why that might happen, but um, yeah, I suppose you want to foster a culture throughout the whole team of just we want to be honest with each other, we want to give feedback, and we really do want to hear it. I suppose the way you react to feedback is going to train people to either speak up or shut up a lot of the time as well. So if you've reacted negatively to feedback in the past, there'll be some people who just stop giving you feedback from that point on. Not saying that would necessarily be your problem, but yeah, that's often, I've seen that cause that behavior before. As far as techniques to encourage them to speak up again, just inviting them to is probably all I got. Just being like, yeah, what did you think? Or showing a bit of vulnerability can often help too. Like when you present a very confident front, some types of people don't want to really question you that much. They're like, oh, he probably knows what he's doing. Who am I? So sometimes being a bit vulnerable and saying like, I wasn't really sure about this bit, or this took me a while to figure out. I'm still not sure if it's right. Sometimes we'll encourage people in to be like, oh, maybe it's okay to throw this around a little bit. So if you are confident enough, weirdly, to be open about the things in your design that you're not yet totally sure about, I think that invites a little bit of discussion. Yeah. Good question, though. Thanks, Chris. I'm the opposite of you. I really want questions.
Yeah, it's a great talk, man. I absolutely love it, and you're a fantastic role model as a designer. So jealous of anyone who gets to work
Don't make
with
me
you.
cry.
I have a really important question, and it's about ego, and it's about working with other designers with ego, or if identifying other designers who are ego-driven
Oof.
in their designs. How do you spot that another designer's designs are being driven by ego, and have you ever encountered an experience where you actually need to maybe not call them out, but give them feedback on their designs, and doing so that wouldn't hurt their ego?
Oh, yeah, that's really hard. I'm not thinking of any specific examples right now because honestly, a lot of my thoughts and admonitions about ego come from reflecting on my own past with cringe and being like, I don't want to do that anymore, and neither should you. So I think weirdly, I've probably been the one suffering from ego the most in kind of my early design career. But if you're a lead, and that's probably the position that you're going to be in when you need to give a lot of feedback on other designers' work, the way to help them feel okay about getting that feedback, I suppose there's two things. You're sort of coaching them on some design stuff, like, oh, hey, maybe this could be good in the design, or oh, you consider this kind of aspect more, or everybody has their blind spots, so you might often find that people have a same blind spot kind of crops up a couple times. So there's that way of mentoring, but then there's the other stuff of like, it's kind of a soft skills thing in a way. So you can also kind of mentor people when it comes to taking feedback. It's difficult because usually when that comes to you, like, oh, this is difficult, or like, oh, I've said something and they seem really uncomfortable about it. that's not maybe the best time to start coaching them about how to take feedback because they're already kind of like, ugh. But if you make a note of it and then if you're having one-on-ones with this person and you have other opportunities to talk to them about what's going on with them, then that's what I would do if I was their lead, because I'd be like, well, I'm going to have a one-on-one with them. So I'll leave it till then maybe, or have a conversation with them tomorrow. I'll note it down. In a perfect world, I note it down. In the real world, I probably forget or try and remember. But yeah, and then start helping them with their problem of taking feedback. Because really that's how overly ego-driven design generally manifests, is that they're just too resistant, or they're resistant in a particular way. And that's just a problem, because that means they're not communicating well with their team. So yeah, it's kind of a case-by-case thing, I think. It depends on the designer. Some people just truly believe that they have the knowledge, and the people giving them feedback just don't, and they're all idiots, and they're not necessarily hurt by the feedback. They just don't think any of it's worth anything. And that's a different problem than somebody who's actually quite has self-esteem kind of troubles, or like a lot of us, just has rampant imposter syndrome and ends up being defensive as a result of that. That's like a whole different treatment plan, right, for that way of reacting to feedback. So, but yeah, I guess I'd treat it as a separate kind of development thing for them, and not really sure how I would keep giving them feedback in the interim, to be honest. But I would probably just try and be gentle, and if they need their ego stoked a little bit, because it seems like maybe they are not super confident, then I would probably ramp that side of things up a bit and make sure, no, this was really great, and lay that on a little bit thicker before going into the whole compliment sandwich type stuff. Yeah, I can't say I've been so lucky, honestly. I've worked with so many designers who are just so easy to work with, like Dwayne and Dylan and stuff. Sorry, everybody else who doesn't know who that is. But those, those kind of people who just don't have any ego problems. But yeah, that's a hard one. That's a big challenge as a lead, very big challenge. Yeah, let's talk about that more later.
When you've worked in a studio as a designer, where have you sort of been in the creative hierarchy? Is it top down, like a director is like, we need this system, figure out how it works, or is it more like from you, like the game could use this system, here's how it might work?
So you're asking about my particular experience in terms of where I've sat in that chain of things, or how things are organized in the studios I've seen?
Or how do you think it should be organized?
Oh, how do I think it should be organized? I think that depends. I think every team needs to be organized based on what they need. Generally, you have some producty people. In commercial games, you have some producty people who are kind of in charge of what does this kind of need as a product in broad strokes. And then the designers are involved in that discussion, but they're kind of more problem solvers. So the designers are usually tasked with figuring out how do we meet the needs of the players, like the genre that you're in and the players you're targeting, and even the IP you're using, and all the stuff's already decided. And you're the problem solvers that are trying to figure out, okay, well, how do we break this down to specific mechanics and rules and features and things that create this experience within this genre for this player? I don't know if that really explains it. There are a lot of different ways of doing it.
I'm sure there are. It's quite a broad question, but that's very helpful. Thank you.
Oh, cool. Happy to talk about it more after this too. I think that's all the time we have, right? We're pretty much done. Thanks for coming and listening.